Hello, everyone. My name's Beth Guide. I'm with Talking Purple, and we're about to exit the echo chamber for today. So I have a few things that I want to talk about today, and they're all over the place. They're not necessarily just centered here in Texas. I'm going to start with the government shutdown today because I think it's worth having some additional conversations about. First of all, I'm going to start calling it a Democrat filibuster because that is actually what it is. It shut down the government, but the Democrats are filibustering the continuing resolution that would allow the government to run. So again, to be fully transparent, we want people to understand why things are happening, and this is one of the reasons that things are happening. Now, there's a few things that have come up in this that I think are worth everybody to know has happened, so that we understand in a little bit better perspective as what's happening. Because, you hear things go by and you don't really know whether they're true or they're not true. And so one of the things that has come up that I thought was very interesting was that there is the Agriculture Act of 1935. Now, I've always been a government wonk, and I've always heard of, this act, that act, and I sort of understand what they are and try to keep up with them. I've never heard of the Agriculture Act of 1935. But inside the Agriculture Act of 1935, there seems to be a provision within it that has allowed Donald Trump in modern era to take money from the tariffs and utilize it towards WICs, which is a program for folks that need some help with support for their children for milk and cheese and dairy products. So you'll see when you go in, you see, the little pink signs on the tags that say WIC approved. That means that the government has approved that product to be sold at that price and to be covered under the WICs program. And you'll notice they're all dairy products. So in typical Trump fashion, he found a way to be able to help the people that need the help around what's kind of going on here, which I know some people will say, well, it's him and the Republicans that have caused this. I get that that's your viewpoint of it. But if I look at it straight up the middle, he found a way to fund and help the people so that the people themselves are not hurt by a Democrat filibuster. Because I could be glib and say, well, part of what the Democrats put back in their proposal, their resolution is they want to help Bert and Ernie. So we want to help Bert and Ernie and PBS for $490 million at the expense of single moms that can't buy eggs and milk and cheese. I'm not going to say that per se because I think it's a little bit hyperbolic. So I don't want to kind of go down that road. But the reality is Trump has made sure that at least the most vulnerable in our society are not being hurt while we're having this filibuster put on by the Democrats. I think that's a good thing. So calling balls and strikes. I mean, it's the Democrats are trying to say that they need to help for health care and they don't like the Medicare, or excuse me, the Medicaid cuts. What they don't like is a work requirement that was added back. And we've talked about that previously, that, Bill Clinton had similar requirements. So I'm not sure that it's anti-Democrat viewpoint to have a work requirement within welfare programs, but this is kind of what this crop of Democrats is trying to say. So that's their prerogative. The other thing that's in there that I thought was interesting is really there is $140 million that they want put back to fund PBS. So that's my Bert and Ernie. For all of us that grew up on Sesame Street, we all kind of understand. And then the other thing that's in there, and I thought this was interesting because, my dad died this year and we had to cover this, is there's $174,000 in there for three congressional people that passed away that they want to pay $174,000 a piece to of our taxpayer money. Now, my dad, I paid for his funeral. Most of us cover funerals ourselves, and we don't get congressional carve outs of other people's money to pay death benefits in excess of what you have coming. So they have this resolution in there to return this 174,000 to three people. So and that's 174 times three. So if you do the math on that, that's roughly about $500,000 just for these two folks. And I mean, $500,000 would help a lot of these people that need help with the eggs and the milk and the cheese and their food subsidies. And I mean, our priorities are like a little mixed up when we do that. I said, I'm all for helping people. I'm all for if we need to create a safety net for the most vulnerable in our society. Let's do that. But we shouldn't be doing things to their detriment to give 174,000 to these other three people. So it's kind of like common sense to me of what makes the most amount of sense to do. And we spend a lot of money and we cut $1 trillion and we're trying to add back things that we cut at the expense of people that need government services. And that's the thing. I kind of said the other day, I don't see much going on in this world, but I don't need government help and support to help me get through my life. The people that are being harmed by this are the people that I think are coming down that should be the Democrat voting base. So, we're putting that out there, and I think like I said, I'm gonna call it what it is. It's a filibuster. That's what it is. The government is shut down because one of our two parties is filibustering, and they don't have the votes to stop it. So are we hurting our own constituents? And I kind of keep seeing back and forth a lot of who's winning and who's losing. Okay, are the Democrats winning this or the Republicans winning this? Are American public on the Democrat side or are they on the Republican side? I think we should be on the people's side. I don't know why I think we're all losing by doing this. I think that they're adults and we should all stop having temper tantrums and fix our problems in a qualified legislative way, the way you should. The same way I said, nobody wants to fix the dreamers because they like the issue of the dreamers more than they like to actually fix the problem. And I think everybody's guilty of this. So when I talk about this, I think that there's a lot that can be said, but good job if we're helping the vets so they're not out too much. Good job if we're helping single moms that need eggs and cheese for their kids. I think that if the tariffs are going to help for this and we have a way to offset this and it's working, kudos for figuring out a solution while everybody's arguing over on Capitol Hill. Okay, so everybody needs to stop arguing. To that point, I've seen some rumblings now, and the Democrats have talked about doing this before. And the Republicans are now talking to do a carve out on this filibuster law to end this government shutdown, because what they're afraid of is that the Democrats have kind of painted themselves in a corner. Because, and as I say this, I think it's both sides that do this. They're answering the far left. That's my left hand. They're answering the far left of this. And they're now not going to be able to bring it back to the center. So what the Republicans, I think, may do is come in next week, maybe even as soon as Friday, and change the rules up to go with a straight up 51 so that we can end this, get everybody back to work, and then figure out how to actually solve the Obamacare problem, which, I mean, if I look at this and I say, all right, so it's a Democrat-only bill that came out. It was supported. It passed 100% because they did it in reconciliation. So it was done in a manner that it was only 50. It only needed a straight up 50%, and it avoided all these arguments. It was done solely on a Democrat situation. And if it's not working, let's come up with ways to fix the problem. Now, in my real life, I run a company, and I think if anybody ever asked me what I really do, I solve problems for people. I look at a problem and I figure out a solution to it. And I think that's what we're not doing. We're throwing money at problems rather than fixing problems. And I think we have a lot of smart people that if they sat down with their pencils and their papers, and you notice I have a pencil here, if we sat down with our pencils and our papers, we could actually figure out a solution to some of these things. But what it requires is you to actually want a solution and not just to be talking about things. And throwing other people's money at a problem, I don't personally think is a solution to anything. Because for every dollar taken from me to solve somebody else's problem means that I now have to go find that dollar within my own budget. I may have to do without, even though I work very hard for every dollar I have. And because I'm not on in one of these groups or are not on government support, I have to figure my own life out for myself. So, not opposed to helping people, but we should come up with solutions that work for not only the people that need the help, but also the people that are helping subsidize the help. I think the thing is that a lot of people don't really realize that there's not a money machine and a money press running out there somewhere. There is repercussions, real hard repercussions. Inflation is up because they've been printing money for so long. So our ability to buy groceries, our ability to buy multiple things, they've gone up. They're coming back down. If you notice, gas prices are now down in the low twos here in Houston. Kind of been impressed. They've been hovering around 230 now for a while. And I see other reports that say they're under 300 or $3 a gallon in other parts of the country. So intrinsically, as fuel costs come down, other things are going to start to come down as well. So I think that's where we are today on government shutdown day 23. I'm hoping that the Republicans just end this and stop the silliness. And then I expect people to come to the table with proposals that are realistic, that actually make impactful differences and don't just continue to spend money or throw money at a problem. My biggest question is, why does Obamacare need all this extra? Why do recipients of Obamacare, per se, need all this extra money? Why did their premiums go up so much? Where is the problem? What is the disconnect? If you fix the disconnect, then you don't actually need to have all the other problems on the outside of it. So that's my thoughts today on the government shutdown, or Democrat filibuster, which is really what it should be called. It's kind of like when I hear about Charlie Kirk. Everybody says he was murdered. No, he was assassinated. Let's use the right word. Um, I think it's important to do that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is elections, and I got a lot to say on elections. Um, Voter turnout here in Houston is down substantially. Now, of course, you can go, duh, it's not a presidential election. Well, that's true too. So I would expect it to be down, but it's down more this year than it has in other years. And I think the thing is there's not something compelling enough on the ballot, or at least the public doesn't know there's something compelling enough on the ballot. Anybody that owns a house needs to have themselves in a voting booth in the state of Texas, because there is a amendment on there that will make the homestead exemption for your house permanently locked in at $140,000. So any future Congress can't come in and lower that. Okay, so that means a lower exemption means a higher tax rate on your house. So you want to have the 140,000 floor codified, that is the way we can do it. So any homeowner in the state of Texas needs to go vote. It's important to your life. And I always find it ironic to me that these low turnout elections often have more impact on your life than the presidential elections, your Senate elections, sometimes your congressional elections, and your governor elections. These little things that are out there, these amendments that are running for the Texas Constitution. Huge. People need to get out and vote. And then if you don't go vote and things happen, well, you've now created this situation because some of these problems have been solved if you would just go vote and approve them. Okay. So I think that anybody that owns a house needs to get out there. The other thing is the other thing I see is anybody who has a kid needs to get out there because I don't think that the government has the right to strip parents of parental rights based on what a school says or I had made the comment the other day and there was somebody in the comments on YouTube said, well, some people should have their parental rights stripped. Well, those people's parental rights are usually stripped when they commit punishable offenses, meaning beat your kid. Well, those are criminal offenses. So, of course, that's a different thing than I get up, I send my kid to school, and the next thing you know, I'm being told all this stuff must be happening. And if I don't agree, then I'm the problem. So, and we had, and I don't want to say we had a similar situation, um, but we had a bipolar. And what ended up happening was we ended up homeschooling her just because the bipolar was causing problems and the school was threatening action. So we ended up going a non-traditional route because of medical issues. Um, these are the things that need to be looked at. I mean, every kid is different, and anybody that ever has a kid, you can have three kids, and all three of them are different. Um, so I just think that the state should not have unfettered ability to take away or interact with your child in a way that you don't agree with. Um, I mean, we never had that growing up. My parents, I mean, they didn't, people weren't threatening them. And this seems to be more and more the norm as opposed to the exception to the norm. So, with that said, in Texas, they're trying to protect your parental rights. I suggest if you have a kid, consider going to early voting and voting because it's important. Okay. Um, I also think two other things have come up that I think I need to because turnout seems to be the key to all these elections. And people know that if you run in certain election cycles when there's low turnout, that you have a much easier chance than if it was a bigger group of people. Well, what I find to be interesting when I look at it that way, are you telling me that that person wouldn't have won if it wasn't for low turnout? Because if that's the case, then we need to make sure we understand the system so we don't have these problems. So that's another reason. So just so I can say this, voting is going on here in Texas. It started on Monday. It's going to end on Halloween. Election day is November 4th. Okay. I keep looking at CD 18 and I have to say my vote to me for that particular district, although I like Carmen Montiel very much, I just cannot say enough things nice about George Foreman. Um, he really is. If you haven't met him, I suggest you get out there and meet him. He is the way he looks at things, the way he approaches things. Um, he's really the epitome of somebody that I think that district would benefit greatly from having him in office. And I think that again, low turnout election, um, other people are hoping they're going to win just simply because. So if you remember what I said, if you're on the Democrat side and you're insisting that you have to vote for a Democrat, then that's Amanda Edwards. But my opinion is that Mr. Foreman's probably, I think he's the best candidate in the race, and I hope that he comes out of nowhere and takes over the entire thing. So that's my opinion on that. In that same vein, and not to belabor a point too much, but the Houston City Council race, nobody knew it was happening. And then when we all found out, um, everybody, it was like everybody jumped in. So there's like a lot of people running. And full disclosure, had I known about that race fast enough, I would have run. I had people come and ask me about running, but it was like literally the day after voter registration had closed. I was on vacation when this came up, and I didn't see somebody had mentioned it to come and get me to do it. And I was on vacation and didn't catch it. And by the time I got back, somebody came to me after the fact and said, "Hey, we want you to run for this seat." So I went to go do it. And I was like, "Oh, wait, you can't do it." So that's a lot of talking to say. Um, there's people running in this race, namely Martina Dixon, that was already lost an election for Houston City Council. The district that she lives in did not vote for her. They voted for another individual. And yet here she is trying to slide in a low turnout election with a lot of candidates and hoping nobody notices. Well, nobody may have noticed, but I noticed. And putting signs up around Kingwood and I guess trying to make people think that you're gonna, your hometown vote for them. I don't think it's gonna work. Um, I really am opposed to this, mostly because I sat and watched her sit on Humboldt ISD and listen to her month in and month out, and poor decision making after poor decision making, trying to keep the superintendent. And as more comes out about the superintendent in Humboldt, I think there's going to be more and more. It's going to become clearer and clearer to everybody why I'm as adamantly opposed to this as I am. Um, Again, I said, for those of you that don't know Sonia, she's the Republican running. She's been around for a while. She helped go for Dan Simons, which, we like Dan very much here. Um, she has been out there trying to help get quality people, not partisan people, quality people. To me, there's a difference. You just don't stand behind somebody because of a letter behind their name. It's just not something that I can do. It's not something that you have to pick the best person that's going to be for the job. And she's been out, she's done a great job of supporting solid candidates. And like I said, if you're a Democrat, I mean, I'm not highly offended by somebody like Dwight Boykin. In fact, half the people that have been on Houston City Council came out, even Republicans, and endorsed him. I'm not sure how I feel about that part of it. Kind of, I don't know. But, it's sort of not a partisan race, so I guess that's kind of why they did that. But I'd be okay with Sonia. I'd be okay with Dwight. I am not okay if Martina comes within 5 feet of City Hall, let alone wins a seat on City Council. Um, she has just not been. She's not demonstrated, in my opinion. Um, what do I want to say? A quality way to make things better. And if anything, the mayor needs help. Our Mayor Whitmire, he's been awesome so far. We've all been amazed. We've got more police here in Kingwood. It seems to be more activity. We're actually getting attention, which is something that we haven't gotten previously. Um, I'm very happy with the mayor. I need to put people on that Houston City Council that are going to help support. And this is an at-large position, so it's the entire city of Houston. It is not just my little, 5 mile quarter of Earth, my map dot. It is the entire city of Houston. So this is an at-large position, and the mayor needs to have solid people. And I can't recommend her. Okay. So, speaking of mayors and why I'm doing this, if you can't tell, I grew up in northern New Jersey. I grew up in Passaic County. And As anybody that's known that knows that grew up in Passaic County, or Bergen County, you see the city skyline of New York from just about anywhere. We used to be able to go up to Garrett Mountain behind my grandmother's house, watch the fireworks over the Hudson River. I spent my first 20 years of my life were spent in North Jersey. Graduated school there, graduated college there. Um, and it's funny when even the internet, I kind of still live my life as if I'm in New Jersey. I just have transplanted myself to Houston. Um, we have New York channels, we have New York radios, we watch New York sports, we follow what's going on up there. And I'm following this whole Mondami thing, and I'm using the word thing on purpose because I think this is the most fascinating situation that I've seen. So, giving a little bit of background, I grew up in New Jersey, and when I was a kid, trying to go to the circus at Madison Square Garden was a heralding experience because you had to walk up and down 42nd Street when it was a red light district. And you'd get off at the Port Authority and you'd have to walk through this mess, trying to just go to a circus. And I remember being a kid trying to talk my mom into letting me go to the circus with the Girl Scouts because she didn't want me to have to go through this area in part of New York. New York was really a bad place when I grew up. It was the place that you were told not to go to. Crime was rampant. I loved Ed Koch. I still love Ed Koch. And then David Dinkins came in, and there was not a lot of law enforcement. So there's a lot of crime. And what I will tell you is the rich Hollywood people that live down in Tribeca now, they wouldn't live there. They wouldn't go anywhere near there. By the time I got to college, we kind of knew how to get in and get out and, you know, drive on down to Greenwich Village, and it was okay. And that was in the late 80s, and that's kind of when Giuliani started, coming into and getting this all cleaned up. I tell this story because there's really only one New Yorker in this race. I remember Curtis Sliwa being on the TV in my kitchen as a kid. We had a TV in our kitchen and used to sit on the kitchen window. And at night when we would have dinner, my mom would have the TV on, and it was this little square box that was sitting in our kitchen window. And Curtis Sliwa was on the TV. He always was talking after Bernie Getz. He was always out there, and he was always defending New York. And I don't know if we don't recognize defending New York in the modern era. I really don't know. But I was looking this morning, and I pulled up the New York Post, and it said, that Sliwa should drop out and throw his support to Andrew Cuomo. And I had to ask myself, why would that be the case? Sliwa, again, only person that defends New York. The governor put a whole bunch of COVID people in with a whole bunch of old people, and a whole bunch of old people died because they were susceptible to COVID more so than you or me. And even when he was told not to do that, he still did that. The governor also had several accounts lots of accounts, I guess, of sexual harassment in the workplace. And I have to ask myself, why would I want him to be the mayor? Now, granted, I live in Texas, so I'm removed, and as long as everybody leaves my radio on and I still can watch my Yankees, I guess I'm okay. But what I actually think should happen is this. Cuomo is muddying the water. Okay. There is a stark difference between Sliwa and Mondami. What Mondami wants to do and what Sliwa wants to do. And I'm of the opinion that as long as Cuomo is in that race, it allows it to muddy up the water, because I think the problem is that the people that would vote for Andrew Cuomo, they would be forced with, can I vote for Mondami? Or do I need to go with somebody that's more traditional? I don't care about D's and R's, folks. I don't care what their letters are and what you identify as. Okay. What I care about is, do we want the city to continue to devolve back to what it was in the 70s? Because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, in my opinion, is all the people with money are going to pack their bags. They're going to call a moving company and they're going to move themselves to Florida or back to California or to Denver or wherever they want to go live, rather than the people that live there, the people like that are there, that are every day, that are your tried and true New Yorkers. They can't get up and go somewhere. And the thing is that Giuliani, love him, hate him, whatever, he did a good job of making New York open for business, making it that people wanted to come back and live, in different parts of the city. Like I said, I can't, it always amazes me how many are down in Greenwich Village, down in Tribeca. It just, you know, the people that live there now, they would never have lived there in the 70s because it was that bad. So why do I think it's going to be bad? Well, first of all, when you talk about not having police, that's a bit of a concern, because that's just not a thing. You have to have somebody that's trying to hold people accountable. And I mean, I guess we can get into what's disproportionate and what's this and what's that, but at the end of the day, you cannot have a city that's lawless, period. And you can't have one of the largest city in the world be lawless. I just went to Paris this summer, and what I was most struck with is that there is police everywhere. Nobody was going to do a thing. I didn't feel unsafe walking the streets of Paris. I think I walked 50 miles. I never once, not 1 second, felt unsafe in Paris. Um, it was really quite interesting, because I went there with some preconceived notions and it did not hold true. The next set of things that I want to say about all of this, and I'm trying to, be, I don't know, moderate with this. I think that there's a lot of groups in New York that may end up with some trouble long term with the Mondami administration. Um, I find it to be very disconcerting to me that I heard the debate from last night. I watched some of it. I have 650 rabbis coming out and speaking against Mondami. And again, I started this out when I started the very first podcast, and I said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. There seems to be a lot of evidence that seems to indicate that Mr. Mondami has more, I don't know, what's the right word I'm looking for? I don't want to say radical. He's more in the camp of a more traditional Muslim individual. He's not, doesn't seem to be a postmodern Muslim. Um, he seems to have friendships with people that were involved in the 93 bombing of the World Trade Center. Um, And last night he talked about how he was going to embrace all the Jewish folks. And the thing is that if you really truly understand some of this, I have some grave concerns, which is why these 650 rabbis came out with concerns. Um, it's a big problem. And I think that we all need to, I mean, I say we because, I grew up there. It's my hometown. Um, I'm a proud person that grew up in the New York City metropolitan area. I am extremely proud to be from New Jersey, which I'm going to talk about that next. Um, so I'm extremely concerned. And what I said in the beginning, if I take politics out of this, out of the three folks that are running, we have one that has defended New York for their entire life. Now, Sean Spicer was on Megyn Kelly yesterday, and something he said, um, I might be amenable to. And as he was talking, I thought about Bobby Kennedy. Um, if Mr. Sliwa was to decide to step out of that race, which I really hope he doesn't, I really think he should be saying, it's Cuomo that needs to go up to go. Um, because they live on, Mario Cuomo's name, those two. Somebody called Chris Cuomo Fredo again, and I think that's so funny for all us Godfather people. Um, but what Sean Spicer said is that Sliwa should negotiate a deputy mayor's position, basically vice mayor, um, in that administration for him to step out of that race. I don't know that I think it makes a difference. I think the real difference would be Cuomo to leave because it would force those voters. I don't think those voters, in all likelihood, could go vote for Mondami. I just don't, unless all you're going to do is vote for D's. If all you're doing is voting for D's and R's, then maybe we don't even need to put names on a ballot because whoever runs doesn't matter if you're just going to pull the trigger for somebody, just based on their policy affiliation. I mean, I voted for Bill Clinton. I'm not going to ever walk away from that because at the time, I did not want George Bush to get elected. I 100% was opposed to that because I didn't think he had the best interest of the country at large. So I understand. I didn't vote for him the first time either, but I really didn't vote for him the second time. He wasn't the second coming of Ronald Reagan. So, I mean, when you make voting decisions, if you're just going to vote D's and R's, well, then let's take everybody's name off the ballot and you can vote for a letter of the alphabet because in essence, that's what you're doing. But I understand that Mondami's saying things that we all know. New York is expensive. Food in New York is expensive. Gas in New York is expensive. It's expensive to drive over. You might ask yourself, why is it that way? Who's been in charge to create that? Crime is on the rise. Why is that happening? And why would you continue to vote for the same type of people that put those policies in place in the first place? Mondami's points are right. His solutions are wrong. That's the problem. So to me, I'm going to vote for the guy that is the only guy that has dedicated his whole life to New York City and protecting the residents of New York City. And I fully recognize that he's going to lose, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand. But I don't understand why more people, especially if you've lived in New York a really long time, don't get it. But the one thing I said this morning, I was talking to the executive producer this morning, and they said to me something very interesting, which is most of the people under the age of 40 don't even remember how 9/11 is. And I said, what's sad is I don't remember World War II either, but I went to Normandy and I respected the fact that those events happened. We're not teaching our kids right. If they don't understand what happened and how it happened and 93 bombing and what happened, and who people are aligning themselves with. If you're aligning yourself with people that are around that, I mean, and there seems to be enough evidence of that. I saw another story this morning about Mr. Mandami's father. They're all very concerning because it's not necessarily a faith problem. It's a matter of a really good example. When I moved from New Jersey to Texas, I was in culture shock. And I had two choices. I could either assimilate to where I moved to or be miserable because I didn't fit in. And the thing is that these are cultural differences. There is definite and definitive cultural differences. And when you're not raised in alignment with something, you're gonna kind of not go along with it. So my personal opinion is I don't care about religion. I care about who's going to protect New York and who is going to protect the citizens of New York. I was back home in November, and the person I went with said to me, and I mean, granted, Eric Adams is the mayor, so it's not like that's Mondami's fault. I think we're going to end up with more of the same because I think it's all Bill de Blasio and keep going. And de Blasio was around when I was a kid and when I lived there, and he should have never been the mayor either, in my opinion. But we didn't go into the city. I mean, the last time I was there, it was back in 2011, and I had no problem. I jetted in, went in, we ran, did a few things, and, we went home. This time, I was like, you want to go? And the person with me was like, no, I just think the risk is too high. So we stayed on the Jersey side. I'm fine with that. But we shouldn't be saying in 2025 that the risk is too high to go into it shouldn't be, Fort Apache should not be all of New York. I mean, I don't know what else to say. So I hope, for whatever it's worth, if anybody can vote in this election, that you choose New York and don't choose a letter. Because choosing a letter, I don't think is a good move. Now, with that said, we're going to talk about the Chettarelli lace. To a second here. I hadn't followed this closely because back in June, Mickey Sherrill was up by 30%, and I just figured we're just going to keep up with the Phil Murphy order of things, and didn't really pay attention. And it didn't catch my attention until I heard Mickey Sherrill doesn't like Taylor ham. I'm from North Jersey, so it's Taylor ham. You South Jersey people just have to suck it up. I am where I'm from. And although that was such a throwaway comment, it shows me how much she's out of touch with the people that live in New Jersey. That she's not, again, culturally not in tune with the people in New Jersey, because anybody knows, I mean, literally in Texas, my supermarket, I live in an area of I know I've talked about Kingwood on the show, but Kingwood is very heavily occupied by people from the Northeast, from New York, New Jersey, because Continental Airlines populated half this place. And Continental's United now, but those, so the Newark hub relocated a bunch down here. So we have huge amounts of people from the tri-state area that live in my neighborhood. In fact, at one point, my entire street in Sand Creek was people from New Jersey, because they all had moved down here on the same move and they bought all the houses. So it was like being in New Jersey, just in Texas. But the Taylor ham thing is so prevalent that the supermarkets here, all three of them, order it, and it's always sold out. Because there's enough of us here. Now, if I could only get them to get a hard roll here, I would be really happy, but that's probably a bridge too far. My bagel shop, they're from New York too. They're actually from, I think, Brooklyn. So it just shows me that the Texas supermarket knows more about New Jersey people and the demographics than the lady that's running for the governor of New Jersey. I keep seeing go by Democrat endorsement, because those people, what I think, are not voting D's and R's. They're trying to pick the best person out of what they were given to vote for. If I'm up by 30% in June and I'm now down to 5%, that tells me how many people you alienated. So I hope Mr. Chitterelli wins. I think he's the better choice as I started to look into this. And he seems to understand that Taylor ham is the quintessential New Jersey thing. So I'm going to throw that out there as well. And then let me see if I have, what else I have. I think that's everything I wanted to say today. Everything that's going on in the world today. At least in my world. I think that's what's caught my attention. So I think today what I want to say is exit the echo chamber and go vote. But before you vote, figure out if you're voting for the best person for the job that aligns with what you think, or you're just voting D's and R's and thinking we're lodging a vote against Trump or something along those lines. So with that, it's Beth Guide for Talking Purple, and I'll be back probably Sunday or Monday.